This is Rita of ACC Taipei. If you already know ACC, please bear me. In case you don't know ACC, quickly, ACC stands for Asian Cultural Council, and this is a foundation initiated by and under the guidance of the Rockefeller family. We supported international cultural exchange, and at that time, we moved all our programs online. So this is the first ACC Taiwan in Dialogue online program. And we're very happy to sponsored by the Jacques Art Museum in Taipei. It is inspired by a current Jacques Art Museum exhibition. Yeah, with a sensational name, brutal, and some question marks. So it became topic of the time. Thanks to a good protocol system to prevent COVID-19 here in Taiwan, we have all the museums and theaters open. So a lot of my friends went to see this exhibition. And then we always talked about like, what is brutalism, why SOS, and am I living in or working in a brutal building? Or is brutalism brutal to our eyes or to the environment, something like that. Well, but then since the chairman of the museum, Aram Lee, is also ACC Taipei board. So we are more than happy to host this dialogue with this exciting topic. And the director of this museum is right next to me. So Shanshan, please say hi.
And hello everyone, I'm Shanshan, director of the UTR Museum. The UTR Museum is the first museum that is focused on the issue of future and the city in Taiwan. So we have many architecture exhibitions before, and this time we are very happy to have a SOS Brutalism exhibition in Taipei. This exhibition is co-organized by the UTR Museum and the State Art Museum in Frankfurt. And this time we really appreciate the ACC has the direct programs and invite curator Professor Wang and Oliver to have this talk tonight. So I hope all audience will enjoy with us tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shanshan. So here I welcome our panel here. The first one right next to me is Professor Wang Junxiong. Yeah, Wang Junxiong.
Hi.
He's a professor at this, we're right now in this college called Chun-Hsiung University. It's the best university in terms of architecture and design in Taipei. And then next to Professor Wang is Nancy. Nancy Lin is, I mean, to me, it's the most outstanding women working in this field. And she's, as far as I know, the senior VP of the AECOM Asia Pacific. It's one of the, according to Professor Wang, the best and the largest, right, architectural engineering consulting firm. And then, of course, in Berlin, we have Oliver.
Frankfurt.
Oh, in Frankfurt. Okay, sorry, but hi, Oliver. Yeah, so he's the curator of, co-curator of this exhibition. And so we're very happy this is an international gathering. Let's take it as like a Zoom party instead of Zoom meeting. Have fun. The Professor Wang is having cookies.
I just am.
Yeah. Hand it over to the panelists.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you, Shanshan, for providing this opportunity for us to be here today. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone who are joining us online. Here we are at 8 p.m. in Taipei, Taiwan. So I'm very honored and very delighted to have this chance to moderate this discussion but in fact, it's a Zoom party. And this is the first time I got invited to do a party. Because we're not here to talk about architecture's history, theory, or a movement. And we're not here to debate or criticize architecture. But we're actually here to have a platform that can bring together cross-culture, cross countries, to talk about something that's relevant to all of us globally. So what exactly is brutalism? This is one of the most bizarre terms to most of us in the academia or the architecture realm, because it's really hard to define. It's not really a theory, and we are not about to theorize it. But why does it become one of the most widespread action or event, socially and culturally, across the globe? So here we are. I'm going to invite Mr. Oliver from Frankfurt to talk to us about what exactly is brutalism and what happened that brought together this SOS brutalism. So may I now introduce and invite Oliver to share with us. Thank you, Oliver. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to speak to you here in this kind of Zoom party. I will take over this term for the future. It sounds much better than a Zoom meeting. Yeah, I'm here in Frankfurt. It's in the early afternoon, and I'm really glad to share some thoughts with you all over the globe about brutalism. But you asked me where the term comes from. Actually, it comes from the famous French architect Le Corbusier, and because when Le Corbusier made one of his famous high-rise or almost high-rise apartment buildings, the Unité d'Habitation in Marseille, in France, in the south of France, he used for the very first time in architectural history, he used concrete in a very rough way. So up to that point, I mean, already the Romans built with concrete. There is a lot of concrete in the early 20th century. Churches were built from concrete. So you have where there was concrete all over the place, but it was always refined. It was always a kind of treated in a special way by kind of stone masonry techniques. But Le Corbusier, the first time he said, it's okay to use that rough concrete. And so he called it béton brut. And from that moment on, this kind of béton brut, which means in English just, or in French, it means just dry or rough, it became a kind of trademark because British architects took this term and said, okay, so why don't we use it, this kind of béton brut, to identify a new attitude in architecture as brutalism. So we should not speak about brutalism. So we should maybe use the French term and say brutalism.
That's great. Thank you. So for those of you who are Mandarin speaking, 我再很快讲一下，刚才 Oliver 已经很清楚的给我们介绍，其实 brutalism 跟这个粗暴的事情是完全没有关系。它其实最早是 Le Corbusier 一个很有名的法国建筑师，在建筑史上在盖马赛公寓的时候，他说，其实我们可以把建筑物不用任何的粉饰，不用任何的装饰，就原始很朴实原本的样貌呈现出来就可以了。所以这个字是这样来的，所以它的粗犷其实跟本身材料的原始性是有关的。所以请大家不要误会，这个 brutalism 跟 brutal 完全没有关系。Okay, good. Now we can go to the next. That if you can start to share with us how this SOS brutalism came about, how you brought it to beyond an exhibition, and now it's traveling and it's making more influence since 2015.
Yeah. No, it's for us. It's fantastic to know that right at the moment the show is in Taipei. And because that was all from the very beginning on, that was always our goal, to make a platform, to make an open platform where different institutions or campaigns or initiatives all over the world can actually can join. And so we're super happy that the exhibition not only traveled from Frankfurt to Taipei, but it grew. I mean, it grew in a large sense, because you added a whole new chapter to the exhibition, and that is what we always had in mind. So when the exhibition goes from one venue to another, it always grows, and it accumulates more knowledge about these concrete architecture, which is basically from the 1960s on, we have to say.
所以刚刚我们很快了解到，其实这个是一个很有趣的展览。最一开始 Oliver 他们的用意就是希望可以创造一个开放的平台，然后让大家可以理解，然后让这个东西可以慢慢一直成长到世界各地，然后更多人可以来关心、关注这些在1950年代到70年代留下来的这些混凝土构造的建筑物。Okay, so we're going to take a break from you, and now we're going to turn it to Professor Wang. 我们现在请王俊雄老师来跟我们讲一讲 why Taipei or at this location becomes the first location that we travel this exhibition outside of Europe, and it's of course our great honor to receive this, and maybe there's a little story behind that we didn't know. So may we now ask Professor Wang to talk to us about how this came to Taiwan?
Yeah. 在2016年的时候，我突然很意外的收到一封信，是由 Oliver 所写给我的。那在那个之前，我其实并完全都不认识他。那他写信来给我的目的是，他说他辗转了很多次都找不到那个波浪大楼的一个资料，所以他希望我能够提供他，因为他们正在筹办这个展览。可是他们在网络上他们找到这个案子，可是他们并没有办法找到任何的一个资料。那所以说我们就这样子就开始就结缘了。那在2018年的时候呢，那我们去威尼斯做展览的时候呢，我们就安排了这个 JUT 跟他做接触。那才2年后。这个展览就已经在台北就发生了，这个是一个非常令人不可思议的一个对这样子，所以呢，它其实是代表了在一个网络时代里面，我们可以用一个非常有效率的一个方式去做一个文化上的一个。
Okay, so Professor Wang just shared with us how we got connected with Oliver. So that was in 2016. There was a letter that came from Oliver to reach Professor Wang. And of course, they did not know each other. And the purpose behind that was to ask if we could help, or Professor Wang could help to research or find out what the wave building is about. And that's one of the projects that we'll be talking about later. And so since 2016, Professor Wang has been helping. And then in 2018, they connected in Venice Biennale and then started this whole thing where Professor Wang brought JUT Museum to be connected and agreed to sponsor. And that's how we brought this here. Lucky us. So now, without further ado, may we have the PowerPoint? Yeah. We're going to ask Professor Wang to show us a little bit of what this exhibition is.
那我们现在所看的，它大概就是我们在台北所展出的一个状态。那这个部分呢，其实我相信连 Oliver 都没有办法可以很仔细的看。那在这里面，我们其实是想要在一个台湾的环境里面，把一种全球性的一种建筑风潮把它展览出来。那同时在一个国际性的一个展览风潮里面，把台湾的建筑把它展出来。所以呢，各位看到在这个 slide 的右手边，它其实是我们在这个展览的一个入口的一个样子。那从这里进来呢，我们就希望他看到的其实是在这个粗獷主义里面最具这个代表性的一个建筑物之一，就是Paul Rudolph 他所做的在耶鲁大学的建筑系馆。那我们用一个非常大的一个模型来做它，那是希望可以让这样的一种房子的一个 scale 可以被看到。那各位从这个可能这个楼梯你往上走以后，你就可以在这个廊道上面，那你就可以看到有24个从德国我们送过来的小模型。那它其实是用一个小的一个尺度它来做展示。
So what you're seeing is the actual exhibition in Taipei, and unfortunately, Oliver hasn't had a chance to come travel, to see this in physical form. But with our virtual platform, we're able to show you and share with you what's happening. So this, what you're seeing is the entrance into the building. And then what is on display is the largest, one of the most iconic project. This is Yale Architecture School, done by Paul Rudolph. And it represents one of the best projects in this period of time. And what you're seeing on the left is a series of models that represent some of these buildings that are representative, in terms of the form and how it was made.
Next
slide, please.
Yeah. 那从这里我们就进到这个展场里面。那这里面呢，是我们从德国所要从德国那个所运过来的这些资料。那我要让各位特别仔细看的是，那个我们在这个展览里面，我们就特别在地上做的这些线。所以呢，那个这些不同颜色的线呢，它会带领的这些观众把不同地区的那个的这些Brutalism的建筑物可以把它连起来。
So what you're showing is the main exhibition, and these are the items that came through from Frankfurt. And what's important and what's very interesting about it is on the ground, you can see on the floor, these colors, these bands that connect from one to the other. And these are making reference as we explore these buildings, the connectivity between the cultures and between the countries, how one influences the other. So if you follow the color code on the ground and the floor, you will be able to see how one linked to the other. And that shows how this whole activity is a globally widespread influence from one to the other, yet they all have their own regional characteristics as you see them.
The next, please. OK， 那在这里面呢，你可以看到这个展览的 details， 然后呢，以及在这个展览厅里面，我们做了一个非常巨大的一个波士顿是一个市政厅的模型。
Okay, so what you're seeing in the middle of the exhibition is a very big model of the Boston City Hall. That's also one of the most representative building of the time. Next.
Yeah. 那从这里面我们开始进到了这个台湾展区。那在这里面呢，我们可以看到我们有一个最具一个代表性的一个建筑物，是由王秋华所做的。这个一个美国研究中心。
So this is one of the most important building by one of the very few female architects in Taiwan, Wang Chou-hua, and it's in the cinema 中央研究院. Yeah, it's one of the American Center building.
Next, and here we see is the main hall of the Taiwan part. 所以你从这里你可以看到呢，有丹下所做的这个圣心女中，以及呢在远方是我们这个展览里面最重要的一个是波浪大楼。那是这个房子让我跟 Oliver 可以认识。
Yeah, so what you're seeing right now is the part that include Taiwan, the Taiwan projects, and in the back on the wall you see a huge drawing or a printout, a photo. That's the Wave building that it's the featured. That's how connected, that Oliver and Professor Wang are connected. And in the foreground, you're seeing Chun-Hsiung High School. That's a girls' high school, and that building is done by Kenzo Tange. So the important thing about this project is that we learned that as it travels, it adds to the host city projects found at the location. So here you're seeing the 6 representative ones from Taiwan.
在下一张
，Next
please. Yeah. 那我用这张幻灯片呢，让大家可以看到我们为这个波浪大楼其实做了一个非常精致的一个模型。那希望可以把这个非常特别的一个房子，把它可以说明得很清楚。
Yeah, what you're seeing is the Wave building, and please make sure you understand this properly. This looks like this as it is. It's not a result of the earthquake, okay? It was designed to look like a wave, and it represents one of the most bizarre way of putting together a building. And the architect who did this actually did the study structure design himself as well. And this huge scale model is meant to introduce how it is done, and it occupies half of the hall in the exhibition.
Yeah, 再下一张 ，the
Next, please.
所以在这里我要大概很简单让各位看一下这个波浪大楼，它在一个真实状况的样子。
Yeah, this photograph shows how it was used at the time when it was done, and how the students were enjoying the playing field with the building in the background.
那在左上角是这位建筑师。
You can see the architect's photo on the right corner.
再下一张。
Next,
please. Yeah, 那这个是我们另外一个 highlight， 是由王秋华所做的这个美国研究中心。那在左边，那你可以看到是我们在开幕的那一天，他坐着轮椅来看这个展览，他非常的开心。
Yeah, so this is the building we talked about, the former Center for American Studies. And in the photo, in the wheelchair, it's architect Wang. She was very delighted, and she was very happy and very touched to see this in the exhibition on the opening day. So that briefly goes over what is actually in the exhibition. So may we now play the video.
The project SOS Brutalism in 2015, it was always the goal to make an exhibition. However, an exhibition is simply not enough if the topic is as big as brutalism. Around that time, 2015, there was already a lot of curiosity concerning brutalism on some social media platforms such as Facebook and Tumblr. So from the beginning on, we wanted to connect to this enormous amount of awareness in the internet. There were so many people out there that were collecting and sharing beautiful photographs of brutalist architecture. So let's go again back to the same spots and have a look at how these buildings arrived into the year 2015. Have they been transformed? Destroyed? Are they already heritage protected? Could we find time capsules that shoot us back into the 1960s or 70s? These questions were the starting points for both the campaign and the exhibition. The Wave Tower in Kaohsiung is one of the most amazing buildings I ever came across. After we found it through some research in the internet, we came into contact with curator Professor Wang. From that moment on, a close collaboration with the incredible architecture scene in Taiwan has started.
其实我觉得粗獷主义很难下一个定义是什么啦，因为呢，它并不是一个历史性的行动，说有一个人发明这个名词，然后他告诉人家说这个名词的这个定义是这样。比较接近的过程是说，大家都不约而同用了这个字，在不同的场合，在不同的时间，然后在不同的这种脉络中用这个字。也说明了，其实他们在他们心中对于这样的一个东西有一个懵懵懂懂的一个统一性，可是这个统一性其实又没有我们想象中的那么高。成人和的这件的这个作品里，这个房子具有所有的这种粗獷主义那个建筑的一种特征，那可是它并不是因为粗獷主义的任何的这种形式上的教条而去做这个房子，是他自己这种自动自发对建筑有一种他个人的一种独特的一种看法，把它创作出来之后才被归类成粗獷主义的一种作品。那个我们作为一位创作者，我们最主要做的并不是去反映一个国际的潮流，而是最重要的是在我们自己对建筑有怎么样的一种主张底下，那 跟这个潮流中间会维持着一种耐人寻味的关系，我觉得这个才是一个最重要的一个方式。
这次台北的展区里面有一个比较特别的规划，就是我们特别新增了五彩缤纷的线条来去串联这一次展览里面的地区还有重要的模型。我们希望让观众可以非常轻易的去了解这些地区跟建筑之间的关系。这个线条的背后其实还有一个非常重要的象征意义，因为粗獷主义它虽然是一个全球化的建筑运动跟思潮，但是其实它在各个地方各个地区都发展出不同的样貌，所以我们也借由这样五彩缤纷的颜色来去象征这些在不同地区不同地方所发展出来呈现百花齐放缤纷的一种状态。忠泰美术馆在规划还有举办每一次展览的时候都非常重视建筑还有文化的推广跟教育，因此我们邀请了将近70位的老师跟学生，将近1年多的筹备过程来参与了建筑工作坊。学生从研究案例到制作图面，甚至到最后制作模型，透过这样的一个过程，能够更了解这些建筑物与当时时代及社会的一些关系。我们也把这样的一个过程还有成果呈现给一般的社会大众，透过参观展览而去更了解到专业的建筑教育它是如何的形成，而且是经过什么样的过程。这个对我们来说也是一个身为具有社会意义的美术馆非常重要的职责。
Wonderful.
Okay, so Oliver is still with us? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you the first question. Okay. So why do you call these monsters?
Yeah. Excellent question. We call them monsters for two reasons. Because the one reason is that some of these buildings are like wild creatures. They are really big sculptural entities that also tend to dominate their urban context. And so these are really monster scale buildings in some senses. And the second reason for the term monsters is because we thought of a way to deal with the anxiety and also with the fear in our audience concerning to this architecture. So we wanted to, and we did not want to override this kind of afraidness. So we took it and we tried to turn it into something positive. And so we thought that it might be a nice idea. I mean, there's these are the Pixar movies, Monsters Incorporated and Monster University, and it's a kind of it's for children. But it works in a way. It tells you that the monsters also have a side that you should protect and that you should take care of.
刚刚我问的那个 Oliver 为什么要叫这些建筑是像野兽、怪兽这样的字？因为这是不是一个很一般我们会去形容房子的一个做法。那他很清楚的跟我们解释，其实因为很多这样的建筑物，它其实尺度非常的大，那有些样子非常的奇特到一个很难用一般正常的状况。那他们也带了一个有一点幽默的角度，在想说，其实很多卡通片给小朋友看的，他们在取名的时候都会叫 monster， 所以它有时候有一个正面的意义，所以用这样的方式来让它更能够让我们一般的人接受，而不是一个过度想去诠释它为什么长成这样子的一个做法。我觉得这个答案还蛮好的。
其实那个他刚才问的这个问题是副总统来看这个展览的时候，他所问的第一个问题，问的一模一样，
高度跟他是一样高的。
那可是我觉得这个里面应该有一个非常重要的事情，应该是说在1960年代到1970年代，其实有一个气氛呢，是想要去做一种表达，因为在战后到了这个时候，它已经开始变得比较富裕，它已经从整个这种战争的气氛中里面已经解脱出来，所以我觉得这应该是在这个时代里面一个很重要的一个因素。
So Oliver, just for your benefit, I was laughing because Professor Wang said when the vice president went to visit the exhibition, he asked exactly the same question as what I just asked. Why are they called monsters? And then Mr. Professor Wang also elaborated a little bit to tell us that after World War II, a lot of these, so we're becoming a little more not as lacking, in the society. We become, I don't want to say we became richer, but at least we were better off. And then people begin to want to express, their, just expressions. So that's why they turn around like that, and it represent a specific time in the past. So that's how he complemented your descriptions. So to follow on that, I wanted to ask one thing, because it's very interesting. These models came, and I'd like to know, because the fact that they were done, and many people who came to visit wanted to buy them, and I wanted to know how you made these, and because in a way I felt that the whole goal behind this whole thing is to create an open platform to invite people to participate. So it's a social cultural thing rather than an academic study. So perhaps that's one of the ways to reach out to the general public. So if you could elaborate a little bit on how that came about and how successful it has been, and what would you do next with these? Are you going to add more, to include 6 of our projects into one of those, or not?
Well, first I need to say that when we talk about the whole project, not only as an exhibition but also as a platform, that it's important to know that we still collect buildings from all over the world. So there is a website. It's simply sosbrutalism.org, and over the website you can make further contributions. It grows and grows and grows. So we started in the very beginning. We started with about 200 projects. At the moment, we have about 2,000 projects on the website. So it grows again and again, and we are highly dependent on the feedback by a large international community that we reach by all the kinds of social media channels that you can imagine. So we have this Facebook account, we have Instagram, we have Tumblr, Twitter, and we do postings almost every day. It's 5 times a week. We communicate with this community, and we make these kind of 5 postings per week, and we would be really happy if we get also feedback. You can write us whenever you want to. But to come to the models are a fantastic thing, because there are 2 types of models, right, in the exhibition. One is the small ones. They are about 20 centimeters high, and they are made really from concrete. And then we use a second type of model that was good to see in the video, and that is, I want to say thank you again to this amazing group of students from Taiwan, from Taiwanese universities, because the cardboard models, all the cardboard models, what you have seen in the video, were done in Taiwan. And the small ones made from concrete, they were built by students from the university in Kaiserslautern, which is about 100 kilometers away from Frankfurt. And they had a great fun with those models, and it was really fantastic for them to mold them. But these are, so to say, the only real concrete parts of the exhibition. And we were always asked, why did you concentrate with the concrete only on the small models? Why did you choose cardboard for the big ones? And we said, okay, when we talk about monster buildings, we should also talk about monster models. And so the idea for us initially was to make those as big as we can. And that's the reason why they made from cardboard, because cardboard, it's somehow easier to handle them also for the students and in terms of transport and so on and so on.
Oh, thank you. So 刚刚让那个台湾的听众们、观众们也可以了解一下，其实这很有趣，就是这个活动从一开始就不是为了只是做一个展览，它其实是一个参与性的，它是一个持续性的，所以它跟很多东西不太一样，是它用了很多的social media 来帮助大家可以进入这个状态。所以一开始，其实在网络上，他们的平台上有大概200个建筑，到现在已经成长到2000，所以我们希望它可以继续增长，让大家可以把大家的想法、大家意见都 post 在这上面。So I also wanted to ask another question about this participation from the school. And I will turn to Professor Wang first, because I know that these large-scale projects were all done by students. So there's a big part about engagement with the academia, the institutions, about the students learning about the history. So you mentioned the concrete blocks, were done by students in Germany. And now we can share a little bit about how these large models were done, the cardboard ones in Taiwan, to complement, the exhibition. Yeah. 王老师，请你说明一下这些大的模型如何那个形成。
其实我们大概我可以分2个部分来说了。第一个部分大概是说，其实我们这个展览一个非常重要的目的是 SOS。所以我们其实是希望能够让下一代的人，他们能够知道这些房子的价值。否则的话，我们去保存它，并没有任何的意义。所以呢，他们必须要先学习像这些房子里面，他们到底它真正的内容是什么。所以我们才我们去做这个保存才有真正的意义。那第二个部分呢，是说我们请他们来做这个房子的时候呢，我们并没有提供他们任何的这个图面，我们是让他们自己去用他们自己的这个资源去搜寻。这个一直到他们已经到了一个穷途末路的时候，我们才出手，然后去帮他们去找图。所以它其实是一个还蛮漫长的一个学习的一个过程，应该有1年多。那另外一个呢，我们也在这个过程里面，我们会安排有讲座、有读书会、有讨论会。最后我们还有一个这个做模型的一个经验的交流会，然后让他们可以让他们这大概差不多有70个学生，他们可以变成一个 group， 然后可以去做一种学习，大概是这样的。
Thank you, Professor Wang. So Professor Wang just shared with us that how the students started doing these models by researching themselves without being provided any drawings. So by the process of doing so, they learn about it, they learn about the culture, they appreciate about what happened. And until there's a need to help them when they exhaust their own resources to find material to build, that the professors of school would not help them to collect these information. So I think that's a good way for learning, you learn by doing it and to really appreciate. And when you do a large model, you have to really know how it's made, or else it will not stand up. Okay. And I think to complement with all that making, there's also a series of lectures and series of workshops to share about the making of the experience, and also talk about the buildings. So I think that's a great thing for the whole process. It's not just one thing, it's a continuing engagement for all. I think that's very good. We have a very interesting question that just popped up on the screen. So the question is, where is the best example of this type of architecture in the US? And besides Louis Kahn, who are the rock stars of this type of architecture? And what can we do if people don't like them that are using them? So Oliver, what if I tell you I hate these buildings, absolutely ugly? What are we going to do with them? And why are we preserving them? Or are we trying to preserve them all?
Yes, when we did the show in Frankfurt, we expected that almost half of our audience will exactly raise these questions. Why don't we blow this away? Why don't we destroy it? And so, and what we experienced is that people that went to our museum, they left and they smiled, and they seem to have made a kind of journey around the world. And I think that is really an important aspect, that you are not confronted only with architecture when you go to the show, but you see also a lot of cultural history. I mean, you learn about, for instance, the process of decolonization in Africa. When the young nations of Africa, when they stopped being a colony, they developed an architecture on their own. And in some cases, they work together with Western architects, or some cases Eastern architects, and in some cases, they have their own architects. And so you learn a lot about how the world was turning into the 1960s and 70s. And I think the more you learn, the more you understand. I mean, we're not really trying to convince somebody that this is the greatest architecture. And I have to admit, I am not so sure. If I have lived back in the 60s, I'm not sure if I would have loved those buildings. Maybe the love comes much later. And so I'm really, I do not want to convince anybody, but I want to tell, as a curator, I want to tell the stories. And if the people then say, okay, wow, it's an interesting story, I see this building with different eyes, then this is more than I can expect.
That's a great answer. So, 所以其实刚刚 Oliver 讲了一个很有趣的概念，就是说，其实我们不是为了要来推广这个 Brutalism 的时代的建筑有多好，那也不是要去叫大家一定要保存它，但是其实借由一个策展人的态度，就是借由这样子一个展览，让大家来参观、来理解这些文化之后，就突然间对它有一个不太一样的态度，开始可以尊重更多不一样的这个状态，然后可以理解到像在非洲那个后殖民时代以后，他们自己自发性开始跟不同的建筑师合作，创造出来的一些建筑，其实有一定的社会跟文化的意义。所以我觉得这可能是这两位策展人最重要的其中一个企图。然后怎么样让大家可以 really 用建筑物来感受这个，它其实就是一个历史跟文化跟社会的一些互动的一个关系的一个记录，所以可能不是真的针对去批评它好还是不好，也不是去说它需不需要被保留，而是说我们要认同有这个东西的存在，然后去理解它为什么有那时候的当代性。那王老师，你有没有什么要补充的？
他这里面有他的问题里面很特定的是问说，在美国这样的房子最具代表性的是哪一个？我觉得应该是由这个 Paul Rudolph 所做的那个耶鲁的这个建筑系馆啊。
Yeah. So to answer the question which is raised about what would be the best example of this type of architecture in the U.S., Professor Wang's answer is Paul Rudolph's building for Yale's architecture department, the building for architecture school.
So who is the rock stars of the I think it's Paul Rudolph. Yeah.
So you are a supporter of Paul Rudolph.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. And so we have another one. Outside of spreading awareness within the architecture community, what concrete actions does the movement propose to really help save these buildings from demolition? It seems Brutalism is a style well loved within the architecture community, yet often is viewed as ugly to non-architects.
Yeah.
So Oliver, you have now gone through quite a few exhibitions in different cities. What's the overall view? Do people change their mind?
Well, I mean, at least we experience that we have a lot of media attention that comes from outside the architectural community. And so that makes me quite sure that we reach a different audience than usually. We had encounters with journalists in Germany, with the Lufthansa business class magazine, for instance, or with a kind of a department store that never got interested into architecture, and so they also they get curious and they ask us, tell us more about it. And so I mean, this is the best you can achieve when you raise this kind of awareness through curiosity. So many people asked us, why do you like it? And we said, yeah, we like it because it's, I mean, in a way, it's the last architecture period where you can really touch the building and you can knock on it and it's full material and you really see, you get what you see, and it's not hollow, it's not covered, it's not a kind of insulation material, it's no plastic around it, it's really what you see. And for instance, we had the exhibition in a town hall in southern Germany, because they discuss with their people if they will demolish this town hall or if there is any strategy to preserve it for the future. And we experience that you will never get a building that is built in such a solid, in such a kind of, in terms of craftsmanship and in terms of kind of generosity of space. You will never receive this in a new building because everybody would say, "Oh, that's much too expensive. We don't do it in that way." And in those days, they built big, and I think that it was really because of the people. And I want to add one thing about the rock stars. I mean, I completely agree that Paul Rudolph was a great rock star, but I would also say that we were quite. I mean, we asked ourselves when we did the show, where are the women? Where are the women in architecture in those days? And it's fantastic that there is a woman. She once was called the mother of the Taiwanese libraries. Who's included in the show in Taiwan. And because before we went to Taiwan, we had women architects from 4 countries in the show that you may not expect. It's one from Pakistan, it's one from Iceland, it's one from Poland, and some women from Israel. And so it's fantastic to see where women architect back in those 60s, where they worked, in which countries. Not in the States, not in Great Britain, but in those kind of more remote regions of the world where you do not expect them. And it was great to see.
Great. 所以其实简单的回答一下，刚才那个当然那个 Oliver 他也附议就是他也认为那个 rock star 在这个时代的建筑师就是 Paul Rudolph， 看起来就是 Paul Rudolph。OK， 那个刚刚有网络上问的问题是在说，好像这个时代的建筑物只有建筑人喜欢，只有建筑人一直在推崇它很好，应该受到注意。可是其实不然。Oliver 说他们这个展览走了几个城市之后，发现开始有很多非建筑的媒体在关注。开始很多非建筑的人在产生好奇，那对于一个展览来讲，可以唤起各种各样的人对它产生好奇心，而关心它，而想了解多一点，就已经是最好的回报。几乎就是我们可以做到以一个策展人希望表达的一个最好的一个 message。那当然刚刚他也谈到说，另外一个非常有趣的是，借由这个展览，突然间看到了一些如果没有这个展览，我们根本就没有意识到的，在那个年代里，女性的建筑师到底都在哪边。那在做这展览的过程里面，也发现了台湾的王春华建筑师，也发现了巴基斯坦、那个 Iceland、Poland 还有以色列等的女性建筑师。那这都是当时没有想到的一种收获，所以这也是一个这个展览后来带出来的一些额外的意义。
Yeah, do you want to say something about our show? I mean, do you have any commentary?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess it's my turn to talk about how I see this exhibition, and as a visitor when I went to visit. Of course, I've seen enough of the curated exhibitions by architects, by critics. And what amazed me when I went in, the first thing I saw was with a champagne in front of the entry of the exhibition, and it has Brut, or I don't know how you pronounce the word, but it's a brutalism, it's a brut, right? So it's talking about the rawness, about the concept behind, and that's when I was very touched, because for the first time you realize what is behind this whole thing is to engage and to talk to the general public. It's not for the architect's sake. And the fact that the models are so large to the point that you just have to peek through to see the space is something that also represents the spatial quality of these buildings. They are so gigantic, and you can actually feel being in the building, can touch the model, that type of interest. So I thought, and also by seeing these color codes on the floor, that you begin to make connections for the different culture. So I can almost feel like I was walking through a time capsule that captures a cross-section of the history and the society and the culture. And the interesting things, I've never seen so much buildings in the Eastern, Europe put together at once, and also that extends all the way down to Africa. And they're so different, yet you see some kind of consistency across, and they were all inspired by the local culture. And so that was the most amazing thing for me. had nothing to do with, what is brutalism, but it's really just to feel the actual material, to feel the actual space and the forms. And I forgot about commenting or criticizing how ugly or beautiful some of these buildings were. I was just focusing on reading what was behind these buildings and who made them. And so I think that to me, that is very valuable. And as someone that is a critic, most of the times when I attend these kind of panels, that I have to say it was one of the most enjoyable, casual experience you have. You can just walk in and walk out without having feel like you have to be lectured on a new thing that you never knew before. But I learned so much about the culture. So I think that would be the biggest takeaway for me. And I wasn't interested in criticizing, any of the buildings. I was just appreciating the fact that so many people did it in a way that they knew how, and put together, you see that whole consistency across. And that is the sheer time that we all went through. So I think that's kind of my wrap up for my conclusion of, how I view and value that. And that's why I think to put this platform together today by Asia Cultural Council plus JUT, the two, that one is promoting the future of architecture of living. We want to bring awareness to, the society from, how architecture play a role, and also from Asia Cultural Council, trying to bridge the cultural differences and try to bring people together in a very open way. That's what makes this exciting for me. And that's why it's so fascinating to be part of this.
其实我自己当一个策展人呢，我讲这话当然是很不好意思，但是我真的觉得我真的很难看到一个展览真的有这么广的一个文化的一个角度来看这真的是一个非常的难的机会。
So before we close,
Well, I'd like to.
Okay.
There's a question from Stephanie Cook.
Okay. So there's a question for Oliver.
Right.
Oh, do you want the next one? Okay.
How
How to think about the current situations of some preserved brutalist architecture, for example, Tower.
The next one, Stephanie Cook has two questions.
Been critically transformed into luxury flats, even though the brutal expression did have been saved. So, Oliver, do you want to react to that first? When we transform these buildings, some of the original characteristics are kind of lost, or the functions are completely transformed. What's your opinion about that?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to bring together to answer to two of these questions. One is about the status of preservation. There are many examples of well-preserved buildings, not only in Germany, also in the States, also in Great Britain. And that was instead of giving you a list now, I want to invite you to go to the website, because on the website SOS Brutalism, we have this kind of color code system. So we have this red list, and the red list is those highly endangered buildings. So they are really in danger of being smashed, turned down. And then we have the gray list, standing around, just being gray. And then we have the blue list, and the blue means preserved and under heritage protection. And so you can get an impression on your own. You just go through the color scheme, which building has a blue mark on it, and then it is protected. And the thing about the tower in London, yeah, that's a good, also a good answer, a good question. I try to give a good answer. Yeah, I mean that those buildings are partly privatized nowadays. That reminds us that once they were not. And so it reminds us which was the role of the state, and the state as a commissioner for buildings back in those days. And this is highly important not to give this up and say, okay, the state doesn't care about this. I mean, we are quite we are in the situation with the COVID situation at the moment, that we see how the state needs to care about kind of public health system, for instance. And this should remind us to those days when the state has a kind of important role also for architecture, and that those are privatized is, I see it highly critical. I mean, there could be a kind of mixed model, which is also kind of quite common situation, that you have some privatized parts, but some are still public. But it should be also still kept also in public hands.
Okay, I wanted to ask another follow-up question. Are there any particular conservation challenges these buildings, face, especially in different kinds of climates?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it really depends on the climate. I mean, in some cases, you can just add insulation even in the inside to keep the concrete on the outside. But if every building deserves a special solution, I would say. And I'm not a kind of dogmatic. I have no dogmatic approach about preservation. I think a building should also kind of transform into maybe something different. Then I'm not so strict to say, okay, it should really look again like it was built in the 60s. I mean, it can transform, but when you keep the character of it, when you keep the kind of special feeling around it, and it's also necessary to preserve it besides all problems, because when you have the whole calculation, I mean, we talk about in Germany, we say it's gray energy. And so there is so much concrete and they have such a high carbon footprint. And when you destroy all these buildings, you kind of set the carbon free again. And that is not a kind of sustainable way of thinking. So remodeling those buildings is always a better solution than to turn them down.
其实很有趣，那个 Oliver 讲到一个，就是说保存跟把这些消灭，就是把它那个重新打造，到底那个中间的那个要画在哪边？那其实他刚讲到其实很多那个建筑物在网上，他们有分类，所以有兴趣的各位观众听众可以上网去看一下，有关于现在各个他们已经 list 出来2000多个建筑物里面，哪些是保存的状态，哪些已经在修复当中，哪些是有可能会被那个 demolish 会被拆除。那我想对于保存的问题，因为好多个那个观众都在问这个相关的问题，那就麻烦你们上网去看一下那些细节。那因为这个时间的关系 we're actually running into the final few minutes, and so before we wrap up, I wanted to ask Rita and Shanshan for the last two questions, one of each. So based on what you heard today in this discussion, and thank you for all of you who asked questions online, and if we didn't get to you, we will try to answer, reply in a separate way after this forum. But so I wanted to ask you, so after you conducted this exhibition and after you put together this panel dialogue, what is the biggest surprise that you have gained in a positive way and also in a negative way? Like, do people challenge you as ACC? Why are you promoting, this ugly buildings? What does it do for us? Cultural exchange. And for Shanshan, of course, you see the visitors coming the exhibition, and what's the feedback you get generally, from kids, from people who don't know anything about architecture. I want to hear the actual effect that has been happening. So maybe Shanshan, want to begin first?
Okay.
可以。
我觉得最有趣的是看到很多非建筑界的观众，他们第一次了解到原来混凝土它是有这么多种多元的面貌，然后它在全世界有这么多元，还有这种很不同的脉络，所以我们很开心可以介绍这样的一个触碰主义的建筑，然后看到非建筑界的观众的一个回应。
So the most rewarding thing for Shanshan as the director for the museum is to see so many people who are outside of architectural realm who appreciated the actual exhibition and asked questions and wonder, and they were curious about how there were so many buildings done with concrete and spread all across the world in a very interesting way. And so that's the biggest reward that she find as the director of the museum after the exhibition has been opened and very well received by the general public. So now we turn to Rita, who provided this opportunity for all of us to be here.
Thank you all of you. It's so fabulous. I'm so glad because the biggest surprise to me, in fact, is like the way you see this show. Because before I was like, I like it a lot, especially like all the models of the cookie shape or toast shape.
Yeah.
But now I feel like all the stories. I think you're all very good storytellers, and I think Shakespeare told tragedy, right? So not necessarily like they're healthy or you introduce something exactly valuable. I think you try in our eyes, you give us stories. I think that's most valuable for me.
谢谢，非常谢谢大家今天的语坛人跟大家热烈的讨论。
Thank
那
you.
我们就
Yeah, I
今
think
天
the Asian Cultural Council in Taipei, we have this very good gathering. We call it Zoom Architectural Party.
Yeah.
For monsters. Okay. And then, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Oliver.
I hope you all enjoy our party. So see you next time.
Bye.
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 Bye, Oliver.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
Bye.
you.
you. Thank you.